In the United States of America, there are over 2 million slaves. These slaves are incarcerated in prisons across the country. Mass incarceration is slavery. Prisons should be abolished in the United States of America. The United States Constitution, the U.S. Department of Justice statistics on incarcerations and exonerations, and my personal experience as an inmate have made me understand we are all one mistake away from being a slave in the United States of America. Mass incarceration stems from slavery being abolished and the fear of freed slaves retaliating. Black codes, Reconstruction, pig laws, vagrancy laws, and convict leasing all led to mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is an $80+ billion a year industry. The system abuses the poorest people in our country while filling the bank accounts of the richest. The Eighth Amendment of the Bill of Rights states excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. The statement, no cruel and unusual punishments will be inflicted, is supported by other amendments like the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment, but let us conclude that even during punishment, your natural rights cannot be taken away from you by another man. When our country first formed, if you were punished according to the law. Was the punitive system perfect in the first years of the United States? Of course not. But respect of citizens' rights was at the forefront of every action taken by the newly formed government. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was created to give freed slaves protected rights. The 13th Amendment says, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." For 89 years, the Constitution was the protector of the people. The addition of the 13th Amendment allowed all citizens to be subject to slavery. The pig laws were laws created to control the recently freed slaves. Pig laws included harsh penalties for small things like stealing a farm animal. Vagrancy laws made it a crime for not having a job. Freed slaves were dealt very severe sentences and fines. The pig laws made mass incarceration the way of the land, and slavery began once again in the form of convict leasing. Convict leasing is when a company rents a prisoner for work. Many of the companies that leased inmates formerly owned slaves. Convicts could be treated much worse than slaves could be because leasing a prisoner was much cheaper for these companies than it would have been continuing to own and house slaves. Cruel and unusual punishments like whipping, beating, and starving inmates were used to control the convict population. The abuse of convict leasing wasn't made public until 1924, when a white man was flogged to death by a lumber company in Florida. The practice was abolished in 1941 by Franklin D. Roosevelt. The abolishment of convict leasing led into production being moved inside of the prisons, and then products were sold to the companies who used to lease the prisoners. The supply and demand for prisoners never stops. The current prison system is justified by many because of the profits it creates. Many states are making more money off the incarcerated than they are from taxes off law-abiding citizens. When a citizen is less valuable to their government than a prisoner is, the citizen's rights are not protected as they should be. The profit-making ability of prison systems is a threat to our free society. We refer to ourselves as the land of the free and home of the brave, something all of us as Americans have heard many times. Is that statement true? The United States has the highest incarceration rate on earth. We incarcerate at a rate much higher than the rest of the world. Every single U.S. state incarcerates more people per capita than virtually any independent democracy on earth. With mass incarceration comes sickness. I was once an inmate. 15 years ago, I had severe pain in my head while incarcerated, and when I asked for help, I was told no. For the next 2 years of my life, I was in extreme pain. When family members on the outside begged to have me tested and were willing to pay to have me tested, I was threatened with being thrown in the hole where correction officers told me nobody would ever find me again. 11 days after I was released from prison, I was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, a bone cancer. Millions of people have had the same experience as me inside of prison. Many of those people did not survive, and many of those that did survive have sued the prison system for billions of dollars. Right now, 40% of state and federal prisoners report having a current chronic medical condition, and 50% reported ever having a condition. Prisoners are 12% more likely to have a chronic condition such as cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, and much more when compared to the general population. They are 16% more likely to contract an infectious disease like tuberculosis, hepatitis, and HIV than when compared to the public. The health system in prisons is making inmates unhealthy, spreading infectious disease into our communities through the employees of the prisons, and potentially removing years from an inmate's life expectancy. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, wrongful conviction statistics claim that between 2 and 10% of all prisoners in the United States are innocent. The United States leads the world in exonerations and incarcerations. 40,000 to 100,000 innocent Americans are currently being held as slaves for crimes they know nothing of. As it was in 1865, African Americans are still the most affected by mass incarceration. They are being used as fuel for the machine that is mass incarceration. 38% of all inmates are African American, but only 12% of the United States population is. Repeating minor crimes such as stealing food gave way to punishments for repeat offenders that allowed for long-term sentences. Many people that are incarcerated are in prison for very trivial criminal offenses. The prison system profits at 4 times the amount it spends each year. They have become a billion-dollar industry, and to maintain their profit rates, they must maintain their incarceration rates. Prisons do not help American citizens. They abuse those that are incarcerated, and when the inmates are released, the inmates abuse the communities they return to. Then what do we do with the criminals? There is a difference between jail and prison. Jail is a short-term punishment that is highly likely not to change the overall outcome of your life and maintain your God-given rights is acceptable. Crimes that result in short-term jail sentences should remain that way. Crimes that would land you in a long-term prison sentence would instead have you exiled from the United States. Crimes like murder, rape, and other offenses that are equal to something that would deserve lifelong punishment would be met with death. Losing the comfort and the protection of the United States government gives us as United States citizens could cause many people to think twice about committing any type of crime that would get them thrown out of this country or put to death. Putting money into making jails more focused on rehabilitation and removing the ability for the state or federal government to make a profit off inmates would help with honest sentencing, and inmates would receive more help to better themselves while serving shorter sentences. Americans locked away inside unjust environments, being used as slave labor, causes sickness to not only the body and mind of the inmates, but when released back to the communities they are from, they poison the communities with their actions. Slavery never ended. It was just disguised as mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is a violation of our God-given rights that hurts minority communities the most. Prisons should be abolished in the United States of America. The Bill of Rights is being violated by the interpretation of the 13th Amendment by corrupt men. Our citizens are being incarcerated at a much higher rate than the rest of the world, and if they return home, they do not have the ability to become a productive member of society. We must end this new world form of slavery known as mass incarceration by abolishing prisons. Until that happens, the United States can never be what we claim to be, a country of free people. Thank you, and God bless the United States of America.